Hello, and welcome to Dice Populi, 5th Wednesday bonus episode, June 2022. I am joined with one verbal friend. Hello.
Howdy, what's Gucci?
Did you say howdy or chowdy?
I said howdy, but I should make chowdy my new greeting. Chowdy there, partner.
Chowdy there. Chowdy, partner. So it's going to be me and Chowder here on the mics as we dive into a question and answer.
Hold up. Zed Ployd says chowdussy, and I just want to say, get out of this chat now.
Over under on how long it goes off the rails is right now. Thank you for asking. So only two of our voices will be in the will be in your ears during this episode, but we are doing a question and answer session regarding Meant to Be, Chowder's adventure, his entry into the Dicey Waters campaign, that turned out to be, I think we could all admit it, a little longer than we expected.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in love with what happened in this story, and we have several of our patrons in the chat. We will be reading off select messages from them. We also have a list of at least 14 prepared questions. So what I'd like to do here is we're going to go down the list of questions, and in chat, anybody in here, feel free to throw us a new question. If we don't go as deep into something as you want, hit us with it. I'm hoping to be here for like an hour to an hour and a half, maybe. These can be pretty relaxed. But in our chat, we have our lovely moderator, Ray, and plenty of other community members that I don't know if I should go down the list. I can always pick that up later. But we have a gaggle of folks here ready to hold our feet to the fire. I guess before we get in, Chowder vibe check. How you doing today? How you feeling?
I'm exhausted, and I can't, pinpoint why. My body is everything... my body just feels terrible, and I can't pinpoint why. It's not like a cold or anything, but...
Just that general malaise?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think you're still tired from running this very, very long adventure? Do you think you just haven't recovered?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess carrying this podcast can be very hard, heavy lifting, but someone's got to do it.
Okay, that was an excellent dunk. Zed, I'm taking that question down. Uge also appreciated that question, but I'm taking that down. I'll probably ask that in the back end, for sure. So, I'm just going to dive in with the first question, and we're going to go down the list. I did not sort this as a good presenter probably should have, but we'll try to take it as we go. I'm going to start with the first questions that were asked, which were some internal questions, and Chowder, I'm just going to have you answer. So I guess before we dive in, Meant to Be it took place on the Isle of Nar Enial, and it featured the mechanic of going back and forth in time. It was revealed to be like Bates' ancestral home, the center of what destroyed the Badlands, and it lasted 17 episodes. And it's so dense with stuff. It is our most easily complicated and ambitious adventure, no question. So these questions that I'm going to ask you off this list, I have no doubt that we and our chat folks, friends, are going to be able to pick it apart even further. But firstly, given that time traveling mechanic, Matt would like to ask you, Chowder, at any point did you get annoyed with his inability to distinguish between the past and present?
Honestly, with how much D&D players are able to retain information, which is none, and I say this being a culprit of just that, it's not a surprise to me that happened. I knew that going in.
Fair enough. So not a big hurdle.
Yeah, when I'm a player, I'm always writing notes. And even then, I'll still just not remember important stuff and have to ask. Which is
I feel
a weakness of mine.
I feel I tend to be able to retain stuff in the session, and then afterwards there are 5 things that stick in my head, and everything else falls out of my head. But if I try to take notes while I'm playing, I can't. The notes come out nonsensical, and I don't remember anything.
I get so hyper-focused on the notes, I'm not paying attention to what's on screen. And
it's very difficult for me. A similar question from Ryan, just warming you up here. Chowder, how do you keep the gods separate in your mind when, to my mind, they all basically have the same name? This is coming from the gentleman who actually did write a full pantheon in our planning before we started the campaign.
Yeah.
Asking how Chowder can remember 2 names while he can't.
The answer is I can't. You've literally heard me rustling papers where would I put those damn names at?
That's what the paper rustling was the whole campaign.
Yeah, no. like although I will say like the gods I made, they have similar names because I want them to be connected. Asgar and Asmagath are twins, and thus, I guess they have brown parents who give them similar ass names. That's a thing in brown. That's a similar thing in brown culture. Like, take me for example. My name is Taimul. My sister's name is Dasnim, and like our parents will like get our names confused all the time. So maybe that's just genetic.
Getting names confused. I'll say I come from a white ass family. My name is Colin, and my brother's name is Steve, and yet those get mixed up a lot too. So I think that's. I think the confusion is a human failing, regardless of the similarity.
So that just might be a parent thing. Gotcha. Noted.
Tom brings up Greg and Craig because we couldn't. The guy in Locked and Loaded, we couldn't remember that guy's name.
Hey there, Greg here.
Incredible.
And as for Galagath, the funny story behind that name is Ryan had a name for a god, and like I'm like, yeah, that's a great name. I'm gonna use that, and I butchered the name, and that's how Galagath came to be. What was the original name? Like Galagar?
It was Caligar.
Caligar. There we go.
Caligar was the name. No, Tom, I don't think it was God of Justice. Caligar, it was technically, because I think the play that we went with was in Ryan's original Pantheon, which Ryan's original Pantheon also is not canon. It's part of our original sketch for this, and we pull from it for inspiration as needed. But no, a God of Justice was somebody else. I don't remember who, but Caligar was specifically the God of Death. And I think what Chowder and I talked about in planning was we wanted to play with the idea of the Great Charm Offensive, which was another thing Ryan came up with, and talk about how it's like maybe he's not the God of Death, but that's what the Mage Lords would call him. And we didn't get into that minutia, but that was definitely like part of the planning for distinguishing these gods on the back end.
Yeah.
If we had gotten into that minutia in the role play and still made it fun, I would be very proud of us. But I think it was safe to keep it out.
Yeah, like I did have various notes on like the relationships between various different gods. Like how Asmagath and Asgar are like the children of life and death, but that's not really the question.
Yeah. No, but I'm glad you did all that sketching out, because we've recorded several episodes of the final adventure, The New Age, with the name of which has already been announced, and that'll be coming out for listeners a week after this episode airs, 2 weeks for those in the room with us. But even though we haven't gotten into it, I'm sticking very closely to the stuff you came up with, and adding another layer on it because, I mean, the rule we all follow is it's not canon until it airs. If we don't say it in a chapter number episode, it's not canon. But we got enough in there that I have a lot to work with. So on this, this is actually a good segue into some of the more broad questions JP Bart just asked in the chat. How much was Colin involved with this story, and how did that affect Bates' play? Chowder, if you actually want to answer the first part of that, I know how involved I was from my perspective, but for you, as someone writing this story, how much did you feel my influence versus how much of yourself did you try to put in there? What was that balance like for you?
For me, like what was important that what I made felt in line with what came before and like what was in those plans. I just didn't want to like walk in and be like, hey, Ryan, your stuff crap, here's my cooler stuff. No, I wanted to incorporate Ryan's stuff in there with my own twist, and your involvement, I very much like used you as sort of a reservoir on what the others were planning, and and also just as someone I bounced ideas off of, like
Ray, that's rude.
Like
Sorry, I'm laughing. Ray just said, like, what if it was crap? And sorry, that sent me. I just laughed.
Yeah, no, I saw that chat too. I can help but giggle. Like I remember like way at the very beginning when like I didn't even have the mechanics for the campaign down. I just pitched you like two ideas, and you're like, oh yeah, the two ideas were like the hunter, where like all the party is like being pursued by one super powerful foe, and they have to like figure out how to beat that super powerful foe, and B, past and present, which is what ended up becoming meant to be. And like you were like, both of those are cool. Is there a way to combine them? And in a way, I did incorporate the hunter into meant to be in the form of Warlock Arlen.
I will say that for my notes, as I'm like planning future stuff, I've been calling him Warlin, and it's just very fun to say verbally. Warlock Arlen is Warlin, but Arlen, I think we've taken a lot of submitted names in the past. I think Arlen's definitely gotten the most mileage. So
Yeah.
fucking luck of the draw on that one. But
Yeah, no, absolutely.
so on, I will say, as far as to answer the second half of the question, how did that affect Bates' play? Not a ton. When planning, the reason I asked Chowder if he was willing to combine those ideas was just because the Hunter to me felt pretty similar to Bellerin Ricard and Stoneholm, and I was like, well, I don't just want to retread that. And going back and forth in time felt pretty similar to the time loop in A Second Chance. So I was like, so I don't totally want to repeat that. So I was like, ¿por qué no los dos? Why not do both? And he was like, yeah, and he just fucking did it. And to be honest, I didn't actually do much planning with him beyond that, except for questions about bait. I obviously have a lot of secrets about bait, things that I will probably spill after the campaign is over, just because I have no idea how things are going to go. But as far as playing bait, it wasn't that hard. I think the only time that my knowledge, thank you very much, Zed. I have excellent Spanish pronunciation, terrible vocabulary, so it's a curse. And the whole thing about playing bait was that, like, I was totally willing to let Chowder take the reins. I said, hey, this is my idea. He's a pacifist. He was trained by pacifists. He was like, no, you're not doing enough. We need to fight harder. And then he got stuck out, and he has this terrible survivor's guilt that's motivating him. And I think he comes from this kind of place. I explained to him the concept of the Great Charm Offensive, which Ryan was like, oh, the Mage Lords are convincing people it's, to turn on their side, to wage war secretly. And basically what I said was, I think he comes from a pacifist druidic society. He doesn't agree with that. The Stoneholm beasts are there, and he doesn't like that the Mage Lords are propagandizing everyone. That's what I gave him, and he just took it and ran with it. The only time I felt concerned was, honestly, when we first entered the castle. It was the episode, I think it was 54, 55 is when we first entered the castle.
Something like that, yeah.
And we turned Arlen to our side, because in my mind, I was remembering the Hunter pitch, and I thought that the guy hunting us was like the BBEG. I did not know about Emperor Kaiser or any of that stuff in the Salt Spire.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
That had me worried too, because Emperor
I think I actually messaged you after the fact. I was like, I have ways for you to keep him a bad guy if you need, and you're like, no, I got it.
Yeah, no, like Emperor Kaiser was always a thing, but like, a big part of like Arlen's, or the original plan for Arlen was like, the guys eventually beat him. They get to the Salt Spire, and like, Arlen walks in like, wait, there's been a big misunderstanding, or something along those lines. Or he's like, wait, before you do stuff, hear me out. And, he spills the beans on a bunch of stuff, but that's not what came to be. And so there was a bit of restructuring, and, that's to be expected.
Yeah. So Zed actually asked a clarifying question: was every druid just an anarcho-hippie? I don't think so, because in the second episode of the arc, Maeve was talking to that guy. There was just an episode of Star Wars just like this too, that alien goat like rat that Zach Braff played, just like a truck driver that's like totally in love with the Mage Lords, and Maeve is like, what the hell is that guy's problem?
Yeah, I mean, like, the way I split it up in my mind is that like the druids of Narnyal were kind of split up into these various factions as a result of Mage Lord tampering. You got the ones who kind of agree with the propaganda and joined in, guys like Arlen. You got like, and then you got the other half who are like, no, I don't like this. I don't like being occupied. I don't like being colonized.
Yeah.
And then like, and that half is fractured into pacifist, non-violence, and a more rebel-oriented, more aggressive ideology.
There's a theory burgeoning in the chat right now that Emperor Kaiser is named for the role, and that he could be the Emperor of Bread. No, the Grain Brothers did not become Emperor Kaiser. Chowder, I don't want to speak out of turn on your behalf, but can you confirm that we can't start Grain Daddy? We can't start it, Tom. We can't start Grain Daddy.
I feel like the Grain Brothers is enough. We don't need Grain Daddy. We don't need...
Oh, my God. God. No, that is not who that is.
What have we done?
This was a terrible mistake. I mean, they're paying for all of our hosting and stuff, so I guess we have
what they want we give.
Yeah, they're the bosses. What a horrible arrangement. So, that was the only time I had trouble with bait, was just me trying to play like... It didn't affect Bates' decisions, but it affected me, Colin. I was like, I don't want to break the BBEG because we came pretty close to breaking this story. I don't think it's as obvious as other adventures that we came close to breaking it. Like everybody remembers the octopus. Everybody remembers Matt spirit breaking at the octopus. We didn't air any moments like that, but they happened, and it got a little tricky. Tom actually in a pre-recorded question does ask us if planning this was different than planning previous arcs. I think that we sort of talked about how we referenced previous arcs in our planning, but Chowder, you said that you were trying to honor what came before. So I guess in the spirit of this question, comparing this to previous arcs, what were the things that you were trying to draw on? What were the things that you were trying to leave behind? Like coming in as the newest member of the podcast, what were the things that you were leaning on in your planning of Meant to Be?
So the things I was leaning on was one, Seraphina and, well, the introduction of the gods that we have introduced, Seraphina and Lema. I took from Matt's like time travel story, and I've already talked about like how I was taking from like some of the plans that Ryan had on the Great Charm Offensive and what have you. From your end, I was like incorporating, or I was like finally sitting down to explain what Bates' deal is, and even explaining the origins of like Maeve's wild magic. I was gonna call it chaos magic because that's how I contextualized it in here. But one thing that jumped up is you guys were like throwing around the idea of like a sort of war of the gods, and like my mind went to like in real life mythology, how like sometimes there would be gods who had the same domain but invoked it differently. In Greek mythology, you had Athena and Ares, who were both gods of war, but like Athena was like the strategic part of war, while Ares was the raw barbarian rage part of it. And so, deriving off of Lema, I came up with two gods of time, one who believed in fate and the other who believed in free will. And like going back to the question, incorporating what came before, I was like looking at elements of what came before to see what could be used, what unanswered questions were there that could be answered here. And then like what I wanted to leave behind for you, because I knew you were going to take the arc after mine, what I wanted to leave you was the big bad evil guy finally coming in. Who do we have to fight?
Yeah.
I wanted to, and like, you know, I was kind of pushing towards like the final plot being some sort of kill God, get the MacGuffin kind of thing, because what good RPG doesn't end with you killing God and taking their lunch money?
Yeah.
Actually, here's the biggest one that I was... the thematic core, like each of the characters have like something in their past that haunts them, something that they would like to change. Maeve, it's the accident that killed her adoptive parents. Locke, it's the loss of his wife and kids from being found out to be a criminal. Colt, it's it's just his very troubled past that he had. And with Bait, it's everything with Nar and Yan, the creation of the Badlands. And it's like everyone has this thing in their past that they would like change. So I kind of ran with that as the thematic core. Like, if you had one chance, would you take it or let it all slip away?
Yeah. So that actually leads to another question, which I think we've answered to an extent, but Hertasi asks, Chowder, what made you go with the Back to the Future theme? And I think beyond that, we already talked about like the original pitch, and now the sort of narrative heft that comes with changing things from your past. But this whole Back to the Future thing, we were saying it a lot. I don't know if we edited it all out, but we were all referencing Back to the Future throughout this whole thing. But that was one of the first pitches you came to me with. Where did that come from for you?
Legend of Zelda. The simplistic answer is Legend of Zelda. Like, a lot of like Legend of Zelda games have like problem solving and puzzle solving that involve like, jumping between two different worlds and like seeing how one world affects the other. And I wanted to do something like that in D&D because, one, I don't see that done very often for good reason. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And
it was, yeah.
And Skyward Sword has these really, like, Skyward Sword whatever its flaws may be, has some of the best puzzles where like you're like using these crystals to like create pockets of the past and like solving puzzles by like trying to open up ways so that you can activate these crystals, and then like it's a lot of like 4-dimensional thinking, and I wanted to do something like that with this. So that's the other reason for the Back to the Future-ness.
Yeah. It was pretty fun. I knew ahead of time that there would be a back and forth thing. I'm glad it got introduced really early into the story, because I don't think I could have sat on that for too long. Whereas with Matt, like, I knew about the time loop, but that took like 3 episodes for that to be revealed, which was not the intent, but that's what it turned out to be.
You almost... It would have to work out like that, because, like, you know, you got to set up the normal before you set up the time loop. Where this is, like, you got a tool, and you can use the tool.
You need to learn how to use it right away. This is the beginning of the Delta Dungeon. Here's the hook shot. Now go nuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Figure it out. Yeah. But no, there was a lot of that. We spent a lot of time in the beginning just sort of, like, pushing the boundaries of what... I don't know how strict your rules were around the crystals, but we were really pushing, like, okay, we cast what kind of spell? Okay, does the spell take effect? How far do we have to be? How many? Like, we were just like needling you for all these little details, because we're like, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, no, I was really happy about that, because I did think about the mechanics of the crystal, and I wanted you to like use all of the buffalo with it. So like, so I was happy to answer those questions, man.
Yeah. So let's see. I don't know that we have a lot of other big overall planning questions, but Zed did leave us a question asking, was there something that maybe got edited out that you would have liked to keep? A gag, a joke, a specific conversation that went off the rails for too long? Was there anything that when you listened to an episode, you were like, oh, where's that thing I liked? Did that ever happen?
So the problem with that question is like, there might have been cases like that, but like, you know, as time went on, that my memory of that faded. Trying to like rack my brain. Mostly stuff that I never got, that never really happened in the campaign because time and stuff, like the Stoneholm Cerberus that you guys were running from. There was a planned boss fight right before you went to the fields of reverse time.
Oh,
but like,
well, I had no idea. So this is actually leading into another question. JP Bark asks us, what was something that you planned for that didn't happen or pan out? And this is my first time hearing about this boss fight.
Yeah, like, you know, since Emperor Kaiser's kind of like this mostly a puzzle fight where like you're trying to figure out how to beat someone who can't be hurt, the Cerberus was more your traditional boss fight where you guys like bonk it to death. But that
bonk the boy, make the numbers go down, hooray.
Yeah, exactly. But like, you know, we were very pressed for time, so that had to get cut. Another thing that got cut, past Arlen was supposed to be a paladin, you know, like past Arlen's paladin, President
Arlen. So he was going to have an oath.
Yeah, he was going to have an oath to Asgard, but like, yeah, no, he had like a cool set of powers where it's like, oh yeah, no, I hit you with like double swords and like both of them are smited, but that never came to be because you never really got into a fight with past Arlen, so yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I kind of like the idea of Arlen having like a sponsor rather than having something he commits to, because what ended up coming out was a story of someone that like realized he was tricked by the mage lords and is now kind of like living out a penance.
Yeah.
And it makes more sense that like it makes less sense to me that he would be maintaining an oath through that, because I think someone in that position is inherently disillusioned by what's going on or by what happened. I really like that instead there was a spirit, Galagath, that he like essentially formed a partnership with.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you thought about that in the change, but just me hearing this for the first time, that's my reading on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, you're on the money with the penance stuff, and you know, the idea is like, you know, he's someone who looks to someone else for power, and in the past he was looking to Asgard, but now he's looking to the guy who saved him, Galagath.
Yeah, it's also now just occurring to me that like Bait is someone who feels incredible guilt for not being there, and Arlen is someone who feels incredible guilt for being there and not doing enough, and it's like it's just this single tragedy that happened because of all these crazy circumstances, and people on opposite sides of it were like traumatized in the same way.
It's like, and poetry.
I don't know.
It rhymes.
It rhymes. Okay, well, Now I feel less good about this.
Yeah, you don't like that George Lucas quote. I actually quite like it. Just this idea.
I honestly do like it. It's just that some of the rhymes are bad.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make up for how bad they are. Like the ingenuity of saying my movies rhyme does not make up for the lack of ingenuity in some of the movies, but that's fine. So for those of you still in the chat here, most of the questions that I've left on this list are a little more nitpicky. So if there's any other big picture stuff that you have a question about, a god figure, a specific character, go ahead and fire away. We will gladly answer those questions. Let's take it easy on the Grain Daddy. But other than that, as we're going, if anything pops up, drop it in the chat and we'll try to rope it in.
Ray asks, could you imagine if Emperor Kaiser had acquired Burger Island? In parentheses, I'm done now, I swear. Listen, there might have been a world where instead of the Zelda-style dungeon thing we just did a business management sim where everyone ran a restaurant, but...
Oh boy, I've played a lot of Roller Coaster Tycoon. This final adventure is about to get very finicky.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we've already banked 5 episodes of The New Age. Let's scrap those. I just finished editing 71. Fucking throw it out. I'm going to fire up Roller Coaster Tycoon right now and build a campaign on that. Serious question, though, from Iron Skull. I would like to ask you, Chowder, which player's antics were the hardest to plan for?
So, like, most people expect Cult, but no, I kind of know what Cult's about, and, like, here's the thing. Most of Cult's spells are damaging spells. I know what I'm getting to with
You hear
Cult.
that, Ryan? We're onto you. We got you pegged.
And, like, Maeve, it's like, she's got a large variety of spells. The Levitate actually threw a wrench with, like, Warlock Arlen or Warlin, because, like, it basically created this moment where, like, everyone could clear up this miscommunication, and it's like, oh, I was relying on that miscommunication. But even then, I wouldn't call that the worst wrench.
Oh, the Dimension Door thing, you mean?
The Dimension Door is also a wrench, yes. But even that, I wouldn't call the worst wrench.
I think I roasted you in the moment for that because you were like, now he's 600 feet away, so he's out of range of Dimension Door.
Yeah, should have just moved him to full 800, but. No. I think the worst thing for me to predict was Bait constantly playing dead. I just like what I was expecting was like, oh shoot, Bait didn't get caught, so like he's gonna like orchestrate a breakout, and no, he just keeps playing dead. What am I supposed to do with this?
Fucking totally forgot about that. Okay, so here's how that all went down. I don't remember if I dropped this in a post-credits or something, but what happened was okay, so we're gonna rewind a little bit back to Locked and Loaded here. We're recording Locked and Loaded. We're in the early parts of it, and then I message Pat. My heart is pounding, and I messaged Pat, hey, what if Bait is the one that turned in Locke? And I pitched that idea to him, and he was just like, yeah, I think that works. That doesn't break anything for me. And so at the end of Locked and Loaded, I was like, because here's the thing, like I have plans for Bait, but I am playing him by the character sheet. So if these other characters reject Bait, I'm not going to force him into the show. I have to keep working to stay in that group. That's a huge part of how I'm playing him is the politics. So I was like so afraid that at the end of Locked and Loaded, he was going to rat me out and kick me out. And I'm like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do for the rest of the podcast? So when we finally had the confrontation in the castle where Locke outs me to everyone and to the audience, and I mean, I remember the Discord discourse around that time, people were not happy with Bait, reasonably so. And neither were the characters. So when the whole fucking place collapsed and we're stuck in there with the rotting Cerberi, I looked at my spells and I saw Feign Death and I'm like, Bait is so afraid that these people are going to kill him or kick him out. He's not going to risk it. And the second play dead, when I got hit with the book, was just a matter of there's literally no other way out of this without escalating the situation. This is the only de-escalation I can do that protects me. So there was a lot behind that decision. What actually happened was I told on mic that Bait is unconscious, possibly dead. And I messaged Chowder, hey, secret, tippy tappy. I cast Feign Death on myself.
Yeah.
And that, I could tell when I sent that message, there was a pause in the recording and just like a general hesitance to engage with bait. And I'm like, I felt pretty bad for putting you in that position.
Like
I played it so to the letter, that spell, that it was obnoxious.
Yeah, no, you've messaged me right in the middle. I've used Feign Death. I'm like, how do I go work with this without giving away the game? I'm not the best.
You did it. I appreciate the awful position I put you in. You did a great job with it, and I think it worked out. There was, and here we're going to get into some more production side of things, because we did run into some pretty unique challenges with this particular adventure. Patrons, if any of you watch the director's commentaries that I've done on Patreon, you may already know some of this, but there was a day where we decided to record 5 episodes at once. This was a bad idea.
Oh,
we
man.
are not
we were
adult enough.
We were
exhausted.
No, we were too adult. Like we were like old men trying to do something early 20-year-old us would have done.
Well, it was such strange energy, because on the front end of that recording, we were all giggles. We could not stop laughing. And on the back end of it, we were so tired we couldn't fucking do anything. So Ray is asking, did you guys have to re-record an episode or like a large part of it? And this is... it got complicated because in particular, we did. There were also 2 instances where we had to combine episodes. So this was a 17-episode arc. We actually recorded 19, and 2 of those essentially got removed because we were so short on time when we finally edited everything down. We're like, this is a 28-minute episode. Not great. So Matt and I went to work combining 2 episodes and then just kind of went from there. That did lead to a problem with the pacing from my end as like a producer thing. And Chowder, I don't know how this hits you, but like originally, I think I don't remember exactly, but I think originally what happened was the Feign Death was revealed at the beginning of an episode, and we didn't find out Bait was alive until the end of it. So there was a whole episode of like, is Bait dead? The other players were also like, is Bait dead? Because of what happened, we lost Chowder. Was it your audio or Matt? We lost your audio for 1 episode, but we lost Matt's audio.
We also
for
lost
3.
Matt's episode.
Yeah. So what happened was Matt's audio being cut down. We lose a lot of the banter. We lose a lot of the chatter and the laughter. And I go through and I say, these are the lines I need you to record, but that still comes out way shorter than the original runtime. So Bait was supposed to be dead. We roleplayed as him being dead for a whole episode before we realized that he was a mouse. Instead, that came up like halfway through the episode. So I think that's an instance where like...
Yeah. No, I remember...
The episode Tragedy of Mackenzie is an all-timer for me, but...
Yeah. Yeah, I remember like listening to those episodes and being like, oh, I kind of like the idea of the audience thinking Bait would be dead for a while, and then...
Yeah.
And then the reveal, he's back. Yeah. He'll save us all. He fucked up again. Yeah. But no, Tragedy of Mackenzie is still a highlight. That was a fun.
That was a turning point in the production of the show because of the challenges, and I broke it down. There are 2 hours of director's commentary on the Patreon if you want to look at it, but like that was crazy. We lost the audio. We had to combine 2 different episodes. It wasn't our first time doing that, I don't think, but it wasn't the first time cannibalizing, but I think it was our first time straight up turning 2 episodes into 1. I had COVID during that part, and I was in the process of trying to figure, like, it forced me to redo my whole workstation, like my DAW setup. That was an effort. That was the hardest episode to produce, without a doubt. And I think it's one of my favorite episodes because what we did to Mackenzie was Shakespearean.
That was beautiful. Like, I didn't see that coming, and I was like, this is beautiful. And I'm like, in the moment, I'm like, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. I love this.
You played it so well. The fucking, the nail in the coffin of time-locked Mackenzie muttering, why did it come to this the whole time? Like, I was actually sad for this fictional character whose life we just ruined when you did that. I thought that was absolute genius. I thought that was so smart and so deft. Just generally speaking, I think your ability to like take improvised moments or unexpected moments and turn them into like big beats is exceptional. I think you are very, very good at that. I was constantly surprised and delighted by your ability to do that whole campaign.
I'm blushing.
That is one example of it.
Although that is a surprising compliment. I always feel like I'm so rigid I struggle to properly react to what's going on around me. Like,
you may feel that way, but again, consider the fact that you created 2 parallel worlds and a set of mechanics to navigate between them and managed to keep it on the rails. So what might feel like rigidity to you is like really necessary ability to control the table. If you couldn't do that, this would have fallen apart. It almost did a few times, but you always managed to rope it back in. But this does lead us to another question. What happened to Mackenzie after everything got resolved? Asks Zed. Disclaimer.
Yeah, disclaimer.
Chowder has relinquished control of the campaign.
Yeah, my DM powers are gone. Nothing I say is canon anymore. But
if you were still the DM, what happens to Mackenzie?
Well, here's the thing. I actually did think about what would happen to Mackenzie, and like, you know, in my little headcanon, what happens is like Mackenzie's descendants would be like super anti-Mage Lord. Like, Mackenzie himself is pretty positive on the Mage Lord, but like that process of like playing telephone across multiple generations, he would become like the Mackenzie family line would become like the face of like anti-Mage Lord sentiment, the Fred Hampton of this world.
That is ingenious. That is very exciting. No comment on how that
obviously
idea
you do what
may
you
or may
do.
not appear in the future. Yeah, I've got plans of my own. This is a real JJ handing off to Ryan Johnson sort of situation here. So who the fuck knows what's going to happen? But that's very funny. I like that a lot.
So does that mean like everything I did is going to get undone by you?
No, but what is going to happen is that I'm going to pay off your things unexpectedly, and the audience will think I'm trying to undo your stuff and get irrationally angry and consider mine the thing that ruined Dice Populi just because they couldn't get with it.
Love it.
So that's how that's going to go.
I'm all down for that.
Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie, so have fun with that. Chowder, did you already have the cause and effect rules in mind before it was questioned through, trying to cut off a limb? This is asked in real time by Tom, the turtle. There were several instances where Colt was asking to cut off Bates' fingies.
The answer to that is...
It didn't come to that.
Yeah, the answer to that is there were already cause and effect rules in mind because, again, drawing from Zelda, I wanted like there to be problem solving where doing something in the past affected what happened in the present. But like, I also did have to play fast and loose simply because time travel is complicated, and time travel while improvising is like trying to play chess on the back of a bull.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to Mission to Zix or heard of it? It's
no.
just now concluding. It's an improvised comedy podcast with incredible sound design. It is a huge inspiration for a lot of the stuff I do on this podcast, but it's not tabletop RPG. It's just straight up improv comedy, but they keep a canon going, and they did a time travel episode where like they released behind the scenes and they were like, we did not want to do this fucking episode, and it did break canon and they had to change a bunch of shit. So the fact that you were doing that on the fly for 19 sessions is nothing short of incredible.
Oh man, like that was very chaotic.
I guess then here's just a straight up question from me. Obviously, I think you and I, at the very least, really enjoy the story that came out of Meant to Be. I really, really like what we told. But from a straight up DM perspective, do you wish you had gone with a simpler approach, or at least a more like a clearer approach than the time travel stuff we ended up with?
So like, I feel like my life would have been easier if I chose something less ambitious, but like when did I ever make things easier for myself? The thing that made me so excited is just how ambitious it is to do something big, even if it blows up in my face. The fact that I tried, I guess, is what matters.
So do we actually want to talk about when it blew up in your face?
I would like to. I think that's a good glimpse behind the curtains.
All right, you've been listening to me talk for a long time now, so why don't we take a break from that so you can listen to me talk a little bit more. This is the Breakaway, and not just a regular this is what happened this week sort of deal, but the big, juicy Fifth Wednesday bonus. Here's what happened this season Breakaway. And I promise I will keep it quick because it's already a pretty long conversation and one I would love to get you back into as soon as possible. So let's talk about the end of the last season. Season of the Origins saw our story reveal the original Badlands take the place of where we saw Meant to Be go. It also saw the origin stories of 3 of the characters that we've been seeing through the entire campaign, and I think it's some of my favorite stories that we've ever told. But I would like to focus for a moment on you, because you, the community, have supported us in a few big ways. One, you participate in our Discord, and it keeps the community alive and vibrant and fun, and it is an endless source of inspiration and joy for those of us making the show, and hopefully those of you watching/listening to the show. And we like to keep track of our Discord members' contributions for the sake of awarding a winner. So I'm going to read off the top 3 most active participants here in the last month, and the winner does get either a free piece of merchandise or paraphernalia for Dungeons and Dragons, such as a book or something like that. And the top 3 are as follows. Number 3 in our Discord, as tracked by Uge the bot, is Iron Skull. Iron Skull clocked in the last season at level 14 on the tracker, meaning 11.3 thousand experience over 615 messages. That's lower messages than some of the competitors, but the amount of memes and pictures sent seem to offset that. But number 2, once again, is Hurtasi. Sam Hurtasi clocking in at level 19, 19.5 thousand experience with 1.1 thousand messages. And number 1 is our very own Tom the Turtle. Tom Aldara, level 20, 21.1 thousand experience across also 1.1 thousand messages. Again, those images and videos do seem to make a difference, but here we are. Tom the Turtle, you are the victor of this season. Thank you so much for being a part of our community, and we'll be reaching out to you soon to discuss how you want to spend your reward. Hooray! Now, as far as other things that you guys enable us to do is donate to charity. We have a Patreon that we use to cover operating costs for the show, do some fun things here and there, but 20% of that always goes to a charity. And over the last season, we decided to donate to the WHO Health Emergency Appeal for Ukraine Fund. As the war kicked off in Ukraine over the last season or 2 of this show, we have decided to pledge our support to groups providing health assistance to people affected by this war. And you have raised a little more than normal because last season our winner actually decided to forego the gift and provide that money straight to the donation. So we are providing $93 in charity to the WHO Health Emergency Appeal for Ukraine Fund. So thank you so much for allowing us to do that. It's a point of pride that we don't just get to make the show, but we get to do a little bit good along the way. We also saw a bunch of Patreon content come out over the last season, including some director's commentaries, behind-the-scenes videos of the animations, entrenched episodes every month. It's been something we've been trying to ramp up and bolster. And if that half-hearted statement there wasn't enough to convince you, don't worry, I've got more in the pipe. So we are going to pivot to the next season. We are simply going to be launching into the season of the new age. Laser focus what's going to happen on our new adventure because it's all going to be kind of a surprise. It's kind of a wild thing. So in season of the new age, we are going to be doing a few things. First, our charity for the next season is going to be the WRIAP, which is the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. It is one of the few national funds that provides assistance and access to patients trying to seek abortion. It has been a pretty tumultuous couple of weeks / months / years in the United States, where we are primarily based, and we are scattered all over the country, so we decided to pick a primary national fund to which we would donate, ensuring that people that need reproductive care can get it. We are also going to be including links to more local, state level things in the description of this episode, as well as the news post on dicepopuli.com that's going to be enumerating everything I'm saying here. Focusing on the Discord, it's time to let Corey out of the brig. The Pirate Prince can once again earn seasonal XP, having won the reward, I believe, back in Season of the Loaf. So, Corey, time to take off those shackles and dive back in, buddy. Let's show him how it's done. Otherwise, we would also like to announce that listening parties are coming back. We're constantly discussing how we want to facilitate this, but the general idea is a few days after an episode airs, we have a party in the Discord that anyone can join. We all listen together, having at least one cast member there each time to host and join in with the discussion. So we'll be posting more details on that as time goes on, but if you want to listen with your friends, we're going to make that as easy and fun as we can. Regarding the podcast itself, obviously the New Age is kicking off our next episode. Chapter 71 airs on July 6th. The community dungeon is being assembled by Matt. We're not going to be doing a lot of work during July because some people have obligations, so Matt will ensure that PDF is assembled in August, and it will be available for free. We're also updating the Welcome to Dice Populi episode to include a recap of Meant to Be, so if anybody is tuning into the show and is like, I don't have time for 70 episodes, won't matter. We will have a 30-minute episode they can listen to that will get them all up to speed if they want to jump into the story right now. I also believe I'm going to be releasing some animations that I've done to the public, including a new one that I'm producing. And those are going to be available to everybody. And that leads us to the Patreon. That new animation is going to have behind-the-scenes stuff associated with it, only available to patrons that I think are pretty fun and hilarious as I build out a pipeline to put those things out more regularly. Entrenched, still coming up monthly. I'm going to do more director's commentaries. Chowder and I have plans to produce another bonus prologue episode that will be dungeon mastered by Chowder. So stay tuned for that, patrons. Last thing I want to announce related to the Patreon is we've been saying if we get to 50 patrons, I'll do more soundtracks, but we haven't hit that number, and I really want to get cracking on these things. So much simpler, clearer, easier to reach structure here. Right now, we're sitting at 25 patrons that contribute monthly to support the show. If we can get that number just up to 30, I will produce and release the soundtrack for A Second Chance. And then if we get to 40 patrons, you get the Locked and Loaded OST with the shanty as well, edited for a soundtrack. And if we get to 50, then we will do the Meant to Be. All we need is 5 more patrons to get those numbers up to get Volume 4 unlocked, and we'll be releasing that on streaming services as well as available to be sold. Last thing I don't want to mention overall is our community project next season is going to be a little less intense. Ray is going to be requesting submissions for IRL mimics. So if you see a picture of something, if you see something in real life and you think, that could be a mimic, maybe it's got a face, maybe it's shaped like a body, maybe it looks like it's about to attack, but if you see something that you're just like, this could be definitely a monster in waiting, you can submit those pictures to us via our email or through our Discord submission channel, and Ray's going to be spearheading that. So that's a lot of stuff. Thank you so much for those of you that have made this possible. All these details are going to be written down more detailed on dicepopuli.com in our news section with image art for the New Age. So thank you for joining us. Please enjoy the rest of this conversation, and we will see you as the New Age dawns. So do we actually want to talk about when it blew up in your face?
I would like to. I think that's a good glimpse behind the curtains.
So to set the stage here, the penultimate episode of the podcast, Fate Bringers, of the adventure, Fate Bringers, it ends with us meeting Emperor Kaiser. We challenge him, and we literally can't do anything. And for a moment, we're all thinking, we cannot stop this guy. It's not possible. Bye, Galagath. We're going to fuck off now. But then Galagath says, no, you can do it, gang. And we end with our rally and we move into the final episode, which I'm astounded with how smoothly we handled the Kaiser encounter once we got into it. But Chowder, why don't you tell us what got cut out there? Because it was not really just a quick pickup moment. What actually happened?
So, I was trying to set up this sort of enemy that's, too powerful for you guys to just stop with just attacking him. And, the idea is by being the Herald of Fate, he very much has this sort of ability to manipulate fate around him. What ended up happening was you guys were getting very disheartened and you just didn't know what to do. And I didn't know the proper hint to give you to put you on the right track. and like, you know, whether you chose to run away or stop the machine, I want you to like decisively go, we're gonna do this. But like, no, you guys were just kind of like, I don't know what to do. You were paralyzed, and that is like the worst feeling. You guys can't do what you want to do as players because I, as the DM, am not giving you enough to work with. And here you were, you moved back to the present, and you guys were just like, all right, whatever. I could hear in the tone of your voice you were becoming disinterested. You just didn't felt involved. You felt like you were in a cutscene, and that just made me feel terrible. And I just, and you know, I did like go, God, I'm sorry, guys. I fucked up.
Hearing you hit that point where you broke character and just said, I'm sorry, guys. That was, I think, for me, as a producer and as a player, the scariest moment in the whole podcast, because I was like, did we break it? Did he break? Is this broken? Can we come back from this? We ended up having a conversation, just an above board conversation where we shared our feelings. And I'll tell you from my end, the cutscene feeling, I think that's dead on. I definitely wasn't disinterested. I was totally engaged in trying to solve the problem, but it did feel like after Kaiser just smacked everything down, the only thing we weren't getting was some affirmation that we can do it. It's like It's like somebody says, hey, you like playing Mario games? Here, play Dark Souls. If you go up against a boss with that context, you're going to be like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But when someone shows you how to dodge right, you're going to be like, oh, there's a whole other side to this I wasn't thinking of. And we didn't have any affirmation that we could do anything. And it took us a little bit of above board to get there.
Yeah. We weren't on the same page, and like I was racking my brain, like how do I give you the information you need to do what you do? And like my brain was at a complete block, and I just couldn't. And and that's where the whole thing ground to a halt. Yeah.
And that's tough for me too. I find myself in a position where I'm doing exactly that, where I'm thinking, here's on one hand, I have the information I want to give to the player, and on the other hand, I want to present this in a dramatic way with some sense of suspense or character or mythos or whatever, make it mysterious. And I've had the luxury of being able to do that. If you just listen to the 3 prologues that just came out, the disembodied voice that reaches out to all 3 characters at the end, there will be answers on that in the future of the podcast that I have planned. But like, if it wasn't clear to the players what was going on, it didn't break anything. And I'm very scared for the day that I'm going to have to do that again, but I'll be in your position.
Yeah.
Where I want to have the dramatic flair, but if I don't find that perfect balance, I'm going to end up exactly where you were, because it's a tough spot to be.
You juggle so much. There's so much in the air, and in that moment, it felt like all the balls hit the ground. I'm like, in front of an audience, like, God.
No, it felt pretty tough, but I'm so grateful for the group that we have.
We were able to talk it out and figure it out. Yeah,
I keep saying it. We're all dungeon masters of different stripes and of different like levels of experience. So it wasn't like we're like, oh, what did you do to our game? We were like, okay, we've been here. How do we fix it? And we all sort of had the tools to communicate with each other, and we came out feeling really good about it. And so for anybody out there listening that listens to only roleplay podcasts and doesn't play a lot, and you're like, oh, I'll never be as good as this, or it'll never be as polished. No, it won't. You should hear a raw version of our recordings. They can be totally disastrous, and we literally came to the brink of the game not working, but it's still a game. We sat there, we talked it out, we gamed it out, we had fun, and you just heard the edited version of it. But it was such a good conversation to have.
Absolutely.
To be able to also, like, in the moment when you're feeling insecure, and I was certainly feeling insecure about how I was handling it, for us to just be able to say, here's what's going on, how do we help each other? Like, it turned out super well, given our frustration.
Yeah, like, what comes to mind is, like, wrestling. Like, when someone, like, does a cool...
Wrestling?
When, in pro wrestling, when someone does a cool takedown, the one on the receiving end needs to, like, work with it in order to make it work. In that moment, we were able to, like, figure out how to slam someone, pull a power bomb, and slam someone into the ground. But yeah.
Yeah. So moving into some more live questions here, Chowder, Arak, the Fractured Prince, asks you, how much pressure were you under to have the quote final chapter, knowing it's not the end, but of the non-headmaster DMs, you had the job of following up on everyone, coming in relatively fresh, and setting up for the final adventure without even knowing what you're setting up.
Yeah.
How did all that hit you?
What was a little nerve-wracking for me is I'm a latecomer to the group, right? Like, you guys were, like, doing your thing long before, like, we ever had the idea to bring me on board. And, like, you know, I'm coming in and it's like, how do I make this and make it feel in line? And how do I compare to the other campaigns, you know? And, thankfully, like, the pressure of having the final chapter wasn't big because, like, ultimately I knew someone else was coming after me, your campaign, Colin, but I didn't understand that, like, I had to set up the final chapter. I had to, like, give you the tools to be, like, I have to give you the tools to be, like, here's the final boss. So, like, I had to set up, I had to set up a big bad evil guy. I had to set up the stakes, so yeah, meaning reinvent the world.
Yeah, Tom is clarifying. Yeah, by give the tools, do you mean reinvent the whole world? Here's the thing. I'm going to share my recollection of this, and Chowder, you can talk me through your thoughts because I don't know how you planned it. I remember in an early version of this thing as we were gaming it out, and I was saying, what if you put these pitches together? And you were like, yeah, but if we do time travel, I'm going to make sure it doesn't change too much. And I straight up said, no, if you're going to do that, I need you to go for it. I need you to commit. You could keep it narrow if that's what you want to do. But I actually said to him, like, if you want to undo the Badlands, like, if that's the choice that your story leads to, like, I want you to commit to that.
Yeah.
And I did not think he was going to take me that seriously.
Yeah, no, like, you know, like early ideas really did lean towards making sure as little as possible changed, so I didn't, like, absolutely break whatever plans Colin had, but then he's like, no, it's cool, it's fine, do your thing.
Yeah, that's my job. It's my job to worry about that.
Yeah, and I'm like, all right, and you know, I'm inclined to let players' actions have consequences, and
yes,
this is some
punish me.
This is some very big consequences. I think what players love most is, like, interacting with the world and then having the world interact back at them.
Yeah, it's why in a world of Skyrim's, D&D is still so powerful, because video games so far can only adapt to you so much. We don't have any other interactive gaming format as reactive as something like a TTRPG. And I think that you definitely went about it in the most difficult and complicated way you could have for everyone's benefit except your own. I think you made your own life hard by making it so reactive because you really committed to the bit.
Yeah.
So most of the other questions that we've got now, we also do have a hashtag release the raw cut here in the in the chat.
Release the chowder cut.
Release the chowder cut. This podcast is presented in 4:3 to respect Chowder's vision.
It's in black and white.
What does a black and white audio sound like? Painful. So I have had a thought of releasing a totally unedited episode, just literally sync the audio, cut off the ends, and post it to the Patreon. So patrons, either in this Sapia for the past, a Sapia podcast for flashbacks. If that's something people are interested in, let me know what episodes you might want to hear. I can certainly dig back in and figure a couple things out. But most of our questions from here on out are a little more general. So my Eberron radio voice is exclusively a Patreon bonus. If anybody does not know what we're talking about, head on over to our Patreon. I mean, that's a fantastic voice actor. That couldn't be me. Who's that? So as far as our other questions go, we have a lot of sort of more general podcast production questions, things like that. So a couple things, and I feel awkward answering some of these things that I'm reading. I should have sent Chowder this list also, but Chowder, feel free to pile on with any perspective you may have as someone who doesn't actually work on the editing side of the podcast.
Gotcha.
Zed asks a few production questions, but one of them is, how much do we edit out? I believe we just had Tom ask a question, how do we make the decision on where and what to cut? Chowder, as someone who plays through the live recordings and then listens to the episodes, I'm curious, what's your impression of our cutting methodology? Before I answer, I kind of want to know how it feels to you when you hear the edited version.
When I'm hearing the edited version, what comes to me is that we're just kind of cutting out fat. Like, we're not like really cutting out our off-board banter so much as we're just making sure the laughs don't last as long as they do, or like the pauses in between are there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a Cliff Notes version of like what we are talking about.
Yeah. I think my goal with the sound production and with the editing is I have a pretty active imagination, to the point where when I start thinking about stuff, I'll start like talking to myself, not realizing I'm acting out what's in my head in person. Like, when I really zone into a thing, I zone into it. When I read a book, I get locked into certain visuals. When I'm listening to a podcast, same thing. When there's no sound design, or when something isn't as rich as I expect, my brain fills in those details, and it's why I'm so interested in producing. So the driving force behind everything I do in the edit is whatever I felt while we were playing the game. I want to make as much of that apparent as possible, because in the moment, it's like, all right, everybody roll perception. It takes like a minute for everyone to roll their die, say, okay, oh, no, that's cocked. Roll again. Oh, what's my modifier? Oh, shit, do I have proficiency?
No,
Damn it. Like, it's just...
That's the big stuff we
it takes like so that's why it usually boils down to, like, I need you to roll perception, and then you just hear 19. Because if I left in everything between the ask and the 19, the podcast would be twice as long and half as fun.
Yeah, exactly. Not an editing thing, but like, when I'm DMing fights and stuff, like what I'll do is just roll one initiative for all the enemies, and just because it's faster.
Yeah.
And it just kind of works. And also it lets me just have the enemies work in unison, because they're all just right next to each other in turn order. So
yeah. I think I've definitely complained about combat in D&D as being my least favorite part of it, not just from editing, but from playing and DMing. I will say that when you hear me DMing combat in the podcast, it moves pretty fast. We try to make the combat sound like it moves at a clip. When I'm actually DMing, the combat moves that fast because I want to get out of it. I want to keep the momentum up, and nothing kills the momentum like rules lawyering a handful of D6s. That is, like, if you want to play Shadowrun, awesome. Play Shadowrun. There's a reason we are not playing Shadowrun.
Like, the thing is, I like getting into like the nitty gritty of like mechanics and like creating a Rube Goldberg.
I think there's a place for that, and I think there's
mechanics,
I think that's a style of play. I just, as someone who is thinking forward to the edit, I am always thinking, how do I make sure that this is fun?
Yeah.
And I try to do it while respecting the rules, but like, if you listen to Entrenched, we don't have D&D going as our system for that game. We're using a system called Quest. And Quest, I enjoy its combat a bit better. I don't think D&D obviously has a lot more robust set of tools, but I like Quest. Just, all right, it's your team's turn, and we just go like, Matt, are you have an idea yet? Nope, I don't. And Chowder's like, cool, I'm gonna throw a fucking Molotov at him. And it's just the immediacy of being able to like just have a thought and do it. I really like that about Quest, and I would like to do something like that with this, but I barely have the time to do what I do on the show, so I'm not rewriting.
My problem with D&D's combat is the mechanics encourage you to just go, all right, I hit the dude with my sword, I hit the dude with my sword again, I use Eldritch Blast. In a different campaign, I'm playing this warlock, right? And this warlock, I want him to be like an illusionist of sort, but Eldritch Blast is just too good in combat. When I'm not, I want players to solve a fight creatively. Attack the knee so that it falls over. Hit the column so that the ceiling collapses. Find its weak point. That kind of stuff. I will say,
that works great in Resident Evil. It doesn't work as well when you're like, there's a big monster and his knee is glowing red. Like, it's just emphasizing that kind of alternate style of play doesn't always work in D&D. I think it can work. JP Bark is asking, would the use of maps help or hurt to speed things up? Or do you think it would cause other problems? And we've used maps in cases before. We generally try to avoid battle maps for small encounters, just because we may rely on that too much and not share verbally what's going on.
Yeah.
And that,
although I do feel like
this needs to be listened to, that's a handicap.
I do feel like Meant to Be has kind of pushed theater of the mind to its limit, though.
It did. It's something that I felt very comfortable with. I don't think all of our players did.
No.
And I mean, that's fine. We all have our comfort level. A couple times in Entrenched, we used a battle map, and the whole time we did that, we were saying, okay, no, say it out loud. Okay, now say it out loud. What did you actually do? Because we would just say, oh, I'm going over there. And it's like, okay, what does that mean? We need to contextualize it. I think playing this for a podcast, I think for me personally, has made me a lot stronger at moving through combat quickly while making sure that I'm respecting the complexity that makes D&D fun. I think that's how I feel about it, but I'm the one doing it. So the other players might have totally different perspectives on that. But when it comes to editing things out, these are all the things you're thinking about. You're thinking about what do people want to listen to as opposed to what do people want to play. It's like I said earlier, don't look to a D&D podcast for how you should run a game. A D&D podcast, in this case, is extremely produced. And I can tell you, I've already started working on the next adventure. It's getting more produced where like I have always had rules in place for myself about like what things not to break. For a long time, I was like, don't mess with voices because I want it to sound like, we're all role-playing. But as Chowder started role-playing 5 characters at once, I was like, I'm going to start putting sound effects on voices to differentiate this stuff. Because it's in the game, if I'm confused, I can say, hey, Chowder, which one's this? It's Yanoa? Okay. But a listener, you can't stop and do that. So what is fun to listen to? So we've gone from a show that had like some light sound design to something that is definitely like becoming production first.
Yeah, I'll say a goal of mine is to be able to pull off a variety of voices, not necessarily for the benefit of the podcast, just because like I want to do I want to be better at doing voices, and it's not a skill I have. It's a skill I'm gonna need to learn.
Yeah, but it was something that was like fine in the moment. We just asked clarifying questions, cool. But it did. I think I'm glad it happened because it did push me to make changes that I think are making the show better as something to listen to. So I'm grateful for it all in all. That's sort of the philosophy behind the editing. If you want to know more about what specifically we edit out and how and why, check out the director's commentaries on our Patreon. There are, I think, 3 or 4 of them up, with potentially more to come. So we've been going for a little over an hour. There are a couple other small questions that I can ask.
I gotta say, the music in Meant to Be was very good. I loved it. Like, I remember like sending you
Thank you.
2 different playlists, one for the past, one for present, both with like a variety of different vibes, especially like for the present, which is like, oh yeah, here are these horror video game soundtracks from like Silent Hill. And it's like, yeah, no, you got the vibe I was hoping for, like the present is tense and dark, and the past is, whether if you're in the village, it's kind of rustic and nice, while you're in the castle, it's kind of like a thriller. So yeah, good stuff.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun with this one. So I might do a bonus of it in the same way that there was a shanty for Locked and Loaded that I released it as Patreon content. I actually wrote a lullaby for Bait way before we started Meant to Be, and that's what I used as the foundation for this, and I just sort of chopped and screwed it. I think around Trouble in Paradise, I sort of came up with the rule of thumb of like, I want to try to use things that sound like real instruments as much as I can, unless magic is involved, and that's an excuse to use synthesizers. So I made a very strong line between past and present by doing the same basic song, but the present version was just synth, and the past version was real instruments. And everything kind of built out from there until we got to the final boss and I started blending them.
Yeah.
But that is also giving me a foundation for what Meant to Be is going to be. But I'm glad you liked it. Music, I think at some point I'd love to do one of these where people ask me questions about music stuff, just because there's so much of it. Another question asked by Ray, how much of Dice Populi is influenced by Star Wars, Star Trek, and Tolkien?
Well, here's the thing. Each of the DMs have their own influences. Like, I believe I've said in the Discord, but like my influences are like Legend of Zelda, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was obvious when you started describing the time lock abominations.
Oh, yeah.
That was actually, like, kind of nauseating. Oh, my God.
Yeah, no, I definitely had Dark Souls on the mind when I was, like, making Meant to Be, so yeah. But, like, I know for you, Con, there's a lot of Star Trek in your what you do, like
more
like the SETI Alpha 5.
Yeah.
That sounds like a very Star Trek kind of thing, man.
It's explicitly that. The whole Kahootek thing, Kahootek has turned into a bigger thing than I expected. Because essentially when I had to do the transition from from Pat's campaign to yours, that above board, I explicitly said to myself, I'm just going to do a Wrath of Khan joke. Admiral Kahootek, it's Khan. I mimic the Khan music. When he says, "You, I never forget a face, but you."
Yes.
That is a quote from his reveal in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I mimic the music.
Yes.
Like,
the Spanish guy who pretend to be
trying
Indian
to play an
guy.
Indian guy. And then everyone got mad when they cast a British guy as a Spanish guy as an Indian guy in 2013. And I'm like, they fucked this up in the 60s. You're mad way too far down the line.
Honestly, what I need Star Trek to do is have an Indian guy play a British guy, play a Spanish guy playing an Indian guy. Bring it full circle, okay?
But yeah, the SETI Alpha 5 was the name of the planet that Khan was marooned on. And so the ships that Kahootek sails are the SETI Alpha 4 and the SETI Alpha 5. But I said, SETI Alpha is it's the human word for seafarer, because it sounds like that to me. And he had the 4, Colt burnt it down, and now he has the 5. So I was like, yeah, Star Trek.
All right. Eric says Emperor Kaiser makes sense now. Dark Souls boss for real. Yeah. What I was thinking was like a Final Fantasy boss, like godlike powers, a grand sense of self, and like especially like just this like sort of gothic angelic imagery. In Final Fantasy V, if you've seen like Kefka's final boss fight, that just like a whole lot of like angelic imagery mixed with like machinery and like this mixture of like religious and mechanical things coming together too. And that is like the idea for Emperor Kaiser, because again, I was kind of pushing for a top. I was kind of pushing for you guys to eventually kill God and take his lunch money, because that's what an RPG is.
Yeah. On the flip side, I am very heavily inspired. I am so into Tolkien writing, not as much as like an actual Tolkien scholar, not by a mile, but like I've read Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales.
Yeah, I'm actually like listening to the audiobooks. Yeah, I'm actually listening to the audiobooks for the Lord of the Rings. I've finished the first one. I'm halfway through Two Towers. A lot of thoughts listening or reading it for first time. Yeah,
it's one of those things where like Tolkien became sort of like so much of D&D is based on Tolkien's writing. There are obvious problems with some of the things he wrote at the time that just don't hold up today. But I think the idea that stands out to me is that more than anything else, Tolkien's approach was, I have an idea for the world and I need to explore it. Not so much I need to tell this epic story, but like, this is the world. Extrapolate. Push the extrapolate button. How does it spiral out from there? Because you
could tell this was made by a history professor, because does he like he has history?
He does. And like the Silmarillion is not fun to read, but the stories in it are fucking incredible. And when I finally read Beren and Luthien, Children of Húrin, and The Fall of Gondolin, those are basically what his son did. Was he took the Silmarillion and said, like, here are the main stories from it. I'm not going to rewrite them, but I'm going to take everything my dad wrote and put it together in these volumes. And when you actually have a version of the Silmarillion that's focused, it's like all that boring history stuff from the Silmarillion, when you dial into the stories inside it without editing them, they're incredible. So I don't take a lot of inspiration from Tolkien in like a very literal sense. Like, I'm not looking to explore orcs. I'm not looking to explore specific gods. I'm not obsessed with the geography. What I am so fixated on, and this is the extent to which I pull from Tolkien, is we started off with an idea of this is going to be Ocean TARDIS. We have a boat and we sail from island to island, and each campaign is a new Doctor Who adventure. That was what we started with. We had Ryan's sketches of information, my first adventure, and I just sort of planted that. I've been helping people figure things out along the way, but I still have not fully planned the final adventure, because I am so in love with the idea that we started with this foundation and have built out from it. Because this is not one of the things where if you go back and listen to Encounter from Farpoint, you can predict what happened to Kaiser. Nobody fucking knew. We had no idea that was going to happen, but this is the story we've chosen to tell together. And by handing off from DM to DM, I love the unpredictability that comes with it. And I am so interested in seeing how the story grows, evolves, and extrapolates more than I am in telling a story myself. I am scrutinizing what you guys have done and what your characters are doing, and I am trying to find the little nuggets in that encyclopedia and pull them together for something crazy. That is what I'm trying to do. But really beyond that, this is just, like Chowder said, a cobbling together of stupid jokes, references, and inspirations that each of us bring from our own domains of geekdom.
Bringing that back to Common Geeking Program. That is it.
Yeah, pretty much. It's the best term for it, honestly, the domain.
Yeah.
Like when I can't think of a better term. So how about we end this on an inflammatory question? So who's the best DM of the group? I can hear our friends across the country polishing their guns as we speak.
So here's the thing. I've only like had 2 DMs on this podcast. That would be Pat and you, Colin. But
well, how about let's actually turn this into a real question you can answer. Ray, we're not going to turn this into a poll question until Dicey Waters is over. Eric, don't say who your favorite is. I can't. My little heart can't take it right now. But Chowder, and this is not like you passing a judgment, but listening to, before you joined, you heard Encounter from Farpoint, It Came in the Night, Trouble in Paradise, and A Second Chance. You listened to all of those as like a fan before we invited you to join the podcast. I guess maybe as either a question of style or of story, which one stood out to you the most? Like, which one made you like most think, oh, this would be pretty fun to be a part of?
Yeah, of the ones I listened to and not like Pat's campaign, which I participated in, that would definitely be Ryan's campaign in Stonehome, because like, one, it sets up all these mysteries. What are these like horrifying hyena monsters that are attacking everyone? What's the story behind this temple thing people were residing in? How did what's his name become the big scary Knoll motherfucker that we meet? Not Knoll, Buddha.
The Buddha or whatever. Yeah.
And of course, this isn't really to do with DMing, just like that is the one that had the most dramatic thing happen in Maeve killing a bunch of innocent people by act, which like, props to Ryan. He managed to wrangle that head into something, because like there's no way you would have expected that. How do you basically go back from, oh god, everyone's gonna hate our heroes, how do you exactly have them participate in the plot when everyone around him does not want them in the plot anymore?
And he did it well. I mean, he said it in his Q&A, like he came up with a whole death cult of people that worship Maeve as some sort of supernatural relief from their suffering. And I was like, I'm like a little heartbroken that was so early days that we didn't know what we were doing and it came up so short. But now he has entrenched, so he got his HBO Max spinoff. He's fine.
One day I'll have my HBO Max spinoff where we're doing Call of Cthulhu someday. But for now,
we'll make it happen. All right. Chowder, I did miss one question I'd like to ask you specifically. Matt did ask, what was your reason for using a djinn as an integral part of everything? Was there something about the creature's lore that drew you to it, or any other creatures that you considered for the role? Referencing the djinn that we found at the bottom of the Mage Lord Labs in the city capital.
Good question, because like one part of what made me want to use djinn is in real life religion, djinn are these powerful beings with like a ton of knowledge of the arcanes, and like what that particular role needed was like a creature with a lot of arcane knowledge. Other creatures I considered was the corpse of a dragon, a captured Fey king, and even just another god. But I ended up going with the djinn because, one, the precedent was set for this thing to exist in
with Crinkle Snoot.
With Crinkle Snoot, and two, I like the idea that this thing that feels like it wasn't, or this thing that feels like a sort of side story actually has a connection to what's going on here. So that's why I ended up going with the djinn instead of the other ideas. And and I guess the significant change I ended up making was like making a delineation between these like mindless monsters that are more akin to what we fought in Crinkle Snoot, and like this like arcane or this powerful being that's almost a god, but not quite. And
I really liked it for a few pretty subtle reasons. I think the fact that you followed up on the Crinkle Snoot thing, I think worked super well, because part of the reason we added your adventure to the end of this, Pat's was originally supposed to be the second to last adventure, but when he told me what his idea was, I knew Locked and Loaded was not going to give me the world info that I think I needed to build a satisfying conclusion. And I wanted him to be able to tell his story. So that's when I started talking to Chowder. It's like, I want to investigate the world a bit more. And he gave me his ideas and his pitches. And I think what you're following up on the Jinn does is, because Al-Raid, the Jinn in your campaign, and Commodore Crinklesnoot, the Jinn in Pat's, are so different, even though we have a very limited glimpse into what Jinns are, we know there's a very broad spectrum of what they can be. So that implies a lot of complexity. And also, they are so much more powerful than spellcasters of the playable races, but clearly not as powerful as the pantheon as the Lamas, the Azagars, the Asmogaths, the Kaisers. And I think that one decision colored in so much about the breadth of this world without having to investigate it. And I think that was a very smart decision that you played very well. And I'm very grateful for it personally.
With Al-Raid, I think what I want to get across is that while powerful, his power isn't so much like what he can do, but rather what he knows. Tom the Turtle says, Jinn, Stoneholm monsters, and time play. You did a nice job tying the previous arcs together. And I just want to say, thanks, man.
I think,
I'm very content with what I accomplished, and I'm really happy that everyone else is happy too. So yeah,
I'm a big fan of the idea of retcons that make past entries more relevant. I love sometimes I love long running franchise because there's like, hey, here's this thing from 20 years ago. Let's figure out what was going on there. And like Chowder did that within our podcast, and that is always what I'm trying to push everyone to do. I'm always looking to pull things back, not for the sake of fan service, because I'm not a nostalgia junkie, but like if we can look back and strengthen what came before while telling a new story, I think that's just smart storytelling.
Yeah.
It's not the only way to do it, but I'm a big fan, and I think you did a good job at it. So that is going to wrap up all our prepared stuff. We've been recording a little longer than I'd hoped, but I feel like I could go for a lot longer. Those of you in the chat still with us, before we wrap this up for realsies, do you have any other lingering questions or comments that you'd like to share? Maybe a question I neglected to answer that I could just edit out again. I don't know. Is there anything else that you would like us to talk about before we wrap up?
All right. Mostly just how did the Stoneholm beasts get to that island?
Born there.
Honestly, I do not have an answer.
Oh, you mean to the island of Stoneholm?
To the island of Stoneholm. Yeah.
No, it was not. It was not explained. I have my own answers for that. What Ryan initially pitched was that the Stoneholm monsters were an ancient form of weapon developed by the elves. I think Chowder kind of canonized that
they were indeed
by
weapons.
Bleeding the power from the Jinn.
Yeah,
they were weapons by the Mage Lords seeping power from the Jinn, trying to absorb its power in different ways. They fucked up and they created the monsters, and they're like, close enough. What I think happened is, me personally, I don't know if this will ever come up again, but I think that based on what Chowder said in Ryan's description is that these weapons were developed, and after the Cataclysm happened, Badlands was created, Tears went up, everything sort of fell apart, and some of this stuff was left outside of Nar Enial. Maybe these were troops left somewhere else, and Bellar and Ricard uncovered the secrets of it and recreated it. Whether we explore that or find out if that's what actually happened, I don't know. It's not entirely my story to tell, but that's my thought.
I mean, I think that kind of connects to a bit of trivia that never really got expanded upon. But like Nar Enial, that's actually Elven, and what it means is Stoneholm. It is the Elven word for Stoneholm. What I was
you fucker.
What I was like intending with that was like,
you bastard.
Like Stoneholm is to Nar Enial what real life cities are like Rome, New York is to Rome, Italy, or New York City is to Yorkshire.
This is Ryan's adventure took place in New Stoneholm.
Yeah, basically.
A couple other quick questions coming up here at the end. Will we get Jerry back? Last I remember, he was on an island, right? I'd have to double check. I believe canonically the last time we saw him was on Burger Island in the above boards, at the table and off the table leading into this adventure meant to be. So what happened to Jerry? I don't know yet. I guess we'll find out what happened to Jerry at some point. But that was the last time we saw him. Colt was ripped from Jerry's loving hands and dragged into the central tear. And I mean, Tom asks follow if the Badlands are gone. So what happened to them? Like,
you'll see.
I guess we'll find out. I guess we'll see what happens. Chowder, you have now seen 5 chapters of the story that I am telling, and I can tell you ain't fucking seen a goddamn thing yet. Do you want to give any vague, non-spoilery teases for what people can expect in the new age?
Meow.
Woo! Okay. Alrighty. God, wasn't expecting that. Okay, here we go. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this Patreon chat here with us. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I love talking about this stuff. I could do it until the day I die. Chowder, thank you so much for sitting down with us and bringing some clarity to this very complicated large adventure. It was super ambitious. I think you did a great job, and I'm very grateful for it.
Thanks, man. I was having fun just explaining the nitty gritty. Like sometimes I wonder if I over-explain things. Like, but nah, this was fun.
These are lightly edited, so if you are over-explaining, everyone will hear it. I'm sorry.
I think that about
all of
China knows you over-explain.
Exactly. So I think that about wraps it up. Thank you again to our patrons who joined, ask us so many fun questions in the moment. You are a delight, and we cannot thank you enough. If you guys want to be a part of things like this in the future, and look for, bonus content, director's commentaries, I think, Chowder, you and I discussed a special bonus project that we haven't put together yet, but I'd still like to do it.
Yeah, same.
But, you've got the shanties, you've got Entrenched every month. We love doing this so deeply, and we love that we can share it with you guys. And making the podcast is fun, but being able to sit down and talk about it it's what every DM wants to do. It's you want to sit down and explain all the crazy fucking investigation board notes you've made during the planning, and we get to do that. Thank you so much for it. With that, we're gonna sign off. We will see you in 1 week from the airing of this episode with the premiere of The New Age.
Ciao.
If you have the ability to crank up that gain, you're certainly welcome to.
I'll just keep my mouth close to the mic, like I'm supposed to.
Yeah. There's no paper rustling to be done here, so